Her daughter-in-law slapped her with a wet sponge on her 69th birthday. Helen Marks, widow and retired nurse, didn't flinch. Derek, her son, sipped coffee like she was invisible. By Monday, a realtor would walk through their kitchen with a key Helen never gave them. The house wasn't a gift. It was a time bomb. And when the papers hit the table, silence would be the loudest thing she'd ever spoken. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. He didn't throw it hard. That wasn't the point. The sponge was wet. My dignity wasn't. I had just finished wiping the kitchen counter, the smell of lemon disinfectant clinging to my hands. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in streaks, catching the silver in my hair. I'd worn a soft blue blouse that morning, something clean, pressed, quiet. It was my birthday. 69. "Hey, Ma." Derek's voice came from behind. "Missed a spot." I turned, expecting a dish, a plate, something to rinse. Instead, the sponge hit me square across the cheek, damp, mottled with food grease and pine sol. It slapped softly, but the sting came later, in my gut, in the base of my neck, in the silence that fell between us afterward. He didn't look sorry. He smirked, tossing the dish towel over his shoulder like he was done with a chore. "You're only good for this anyway," he said, grabbing his coffee and walking past. From the kitchen table, Tracy gave a soft, breathy laugh, not loud, not shocked, just amused enough to make my skin crawl. Emily was on the stairs, my granddaughter, 12 years old. She stopped halfway down, eyes wide and unmoving. Her mouth parted like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. She just stared, frozen. I didn't react, not with words. I picked up the sponge from the floor, dropped it gently into the sink, and ran the water until it was scalding hot. I washed my hands twice. I dried them carefully on the hem of my blouse. Then I turned back to the kitchen table. "Dinner's at 6, I said flatly. "I'll need the oven." Tracy didn't answer. She just scrolled on her phone and reached for the half-eaten yogurt cup Derek had left behind. I walked down the hallway, past the photos they never updated, past the dented coat rack I'd installed 20 years ago, into the small bedroom I'd been pushed into when Derek and Tracy decided we needed our space back. I closed the door softly, sat on the edge of the twin bed with the floral quilt I brought from my old place. My suitcase was tucked underneath, same as always. I pulled it out slowly. The zipper caught on the corner. I tugged. It gave. Beneath the folded cardigans and socks was a navy blue folder. Smooth. Untouched. I'd kept it since Walter died. I never opened it in front of anyone, not even Derek. Back then, he was grieving. Kind. Almost human. I opened the folder and stared at the pages. Grant deed. Retained interest. Helen Marks, primary holder, 60% vested ownership. Derek Marks, secondary holder, 40%, contingent on occupancy and filing filed, but never updated, never re-recorded. My breath steadied. He thought throwing a sponge defined me. That the years I spent cleaning houses, raising boys, fixing broken hinges and burnt dinners somehow shrank me into nothing but service. But names mean something when they're typed in black ink and stamped with county seals. Outside the door, I heard the laugh track from some sitcom Derek liked. Plates clinking, ice rattling in Tracy's glass. I slid the folder back into the suitcase, this time not to hide it, to prepare it. I stood, walked to the mirror above the dresser, and met my own gaze. Not soft, not broken. "Let's see," I whispered to myself, "if I'm still only good for scrubbing." The next morning, Derek was standing at the coffee pot in his gym shorts, tapping at his phone like the world owed him attention. He didn't look at me when he spoke. He never really did anymore. "You need to get the sheets washed today, all 3 beds," he said casually. "And don't just ball them up like last time, fold them right." I paused mid-slice, paring an apple for Emily's lunch. "I did fold them," Derek scoffed. "Well, fold them better." He walked out of the kitchen before I could respond, calling over his shoulder, "And the yard looks like hell. Just pull the weeds at least. You're home all day." Tracy emerged from the bathroom 30 minutes later, her curls wrapped in a towel, her voice tight with annoyance. Did you run the hot water again? I could barely rinse my hair. I used it for dishes, I said, not meeting her eyes. You know we have limits, right? She muttered. Just be mindful, okay? Mindful. That's what she said. Like I was draining the Hoover Dam one plate at a time. I made no argument, just dried my hands, walked down the hall, and made mental notes. The garden hose ran cold after 20 seconds. Tracy used eucalyptus shampoo that smelled like sharp mint and disdain. The thermostat hadn't moved from 74 in weeks, set by Derek, enforced like scripture. Even the groceries came from his debit card, the one tied to utilities and everything joint. He'd taken over the bills after Walter died, said it was simpler this way. Back then, I thought it was kindness. It was custody of me. After lunch, while they both disappeared upstairs, he to nap, she to scroll, I retrieved the business card tucked inside my checkbook. Glenda McKay, attorney at law, probate and property rights. She had handled Walter's estate back in 2009. Gentle voice, sharp mind. I remembered how she'd warned us. Titles can lie if no one checks the truth underneath. I stepped out onto the back porch where the Wi-Fi barely reached and dialed her office number. 3 rings. Then, McKay and Hartman. It's Helen Marks, I said. I need to talk to Glenda. It's urgent. The receptionist hesitated, then said, 1 moment, please. 30 seconds later, Glenda came on the line. Helen? I need you to look up something for me, I said, voice low. The house, the one Walter left us. I think Derek never finalized the title transfer. I still have the original deed in my name. Silence hummed in my ear. I can look into it today, she said finally. If what you're saying is true, and he never filed, well, you might be holding more power than you think. I'm not thinking. I'm watching now, I said. Just tell me what's mine. That night I scrubbed the floor while they watched TV. I wiped baseboards, cleaned grout, not because I had to, because I needed to remember what it felt like to reclaim a place, inch by inch. At 10:14 p.m., just after I turned off the hall light and slid beneath the worn quilt, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Glenda McKay. Text message. Helen, you still hold majority ownership. He never filed the title update. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon, just strong enough to wake something inside me. It was quiet, not empty, just quiet. The kind of place that didn't need to shout to be known. I chose a corner table near the window and sat with my back to the wall. I didn't want to be surprised today. Glenda arrived 10 minutes early, dressed in a slate gray blazer and slacks, her hair pinned in the same tight bun I remembered from when Walter and I first met with her over a decade ago. She gave me a soft smile, but her eyes were already working. Thanks for meeting me, I said, stirring a sugar packet into the tea I hadn't touched. I wouldn't have waited, she replied, setting down a manila folder. I've seen this play out too many times. She opened the folder, crisp and methodical. Inside, a printout of the property record, the official county stamp in the upper right corner. The words blurred for a moment as my eyes scanned them, but one line jumped into sharp focus. Helen Marks. 60% vested ownership with retained living interest. You were right, Glenda said. The transfer Derek tried to start was never finalized. It was filed, but not recorded. Probably because he didn't want to pay the processing fees or thought he had time. I let that sink in. So, legally? I asked. You are the majority title holder, which means you can reside there indefinitely, force a sale, or even initiate an eviction process if needed. I looked down at the table. The wood grain swirled in soft curves, like everything was moving around me but not touching me. He said I was just crashing, a guest. Said it like the house was charity. Glenda didn't flinch. They can say whatever they want. The deed says otherwise. I exhaled. Not relief, something heavier. The kind of breath you release after holding your voice back for too long. You could confront him, Glenda offered carefully. Or you could do this quietly, secure a buyer, list the house, file without notice. You have every right. Would that be legal? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She nodded. More than legal, it's protected. A pause passed between us. You don't have to decide today. But I already had. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded envelope. Inside, the power of sale form she'd emailed me 2 nights ago. I'd signed it at 2:47 a.m. after the house went dark, and the only sound was the hum of the fridge behind my bedroom wall. I slid it across the table. I want to do it quiet, no shouting, no heads up, just done. Glenda leaned in slightly. Are you sure? I met her eyes. I cleaned strangers' toilets for 30 years, raised 2 boys and buried 1 husband in this town. I've been quiet, I've been respectful, but I won't be erased. She accepted the form without a word, tucking it into her case. I'll move fast, she said. I shook my head slowly, corrected her. Move faster. The server came by and refilled our cups. I didn't touch mine. As Glenda stood to leave, she said one last thing over her shoulder. You're not just a name on paper, Helen. You're the reason it still exists. I watched her disappear through the door and into the heat-soaked afternoon. Back at the table, I stared down at the empty space her folder had left behind. There was nothing quiet about this silence. It was the kind that builds, steady, patient, final. The scent of garlic and thyme filled the house like memory, rich, slow, familiar. Derek always said I made pot roast better than anyone, as if praise could erase disrespect, as if compliments could unspit a sponge. I peeled carrots in silence, quartered potatoes like clockwork. My hands moved with purpose, but inside, I was somewhere else entirely. Every drawer I opened, every spice I measured, wasn't just for flavor, it was reconnaissance, a slow audit of what mattered to me, what I'd take when the door finally shut behind me. Upstairs, the creak of floorboards meant Tracy was finishing a shower. Her blow-dryer would start in 3 minutes. She always blasted it on high, even when Emily was trying to nap. I moved through the kitchen like a shadow. I opened the junk drawer, pulled out the small folder I had hidden behind expired coupons. My passport, social security card, bank statements, all of it had been slowly gathered and stashed over weeks, piece by quiet piece. The oven beeped. I slipped the roast in. From the hallway, I heard Emily's small voice. Grandma? I turned, softening my face as she padded in with her mismatched socks and sleep-tousled ponytail. She rubbed her eyes and leaned against the doorway. Are you okay? She asked. That question hung in the air like perfume, light but potent. I smiled. Never better. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press. Want to help me make cornbread? I asked. Her face brightened. Can I crack the eggs? We stood shoulder to shoulder at the counter. She hummed while she stirred. I memorized it. Every note, the smell of vanilla in the air, the way her nose scrunched when she focused. I didn't know if I'd have moments like this again. Not soon. The table was set by 6. Derek came in from the garage, reeking of sweat and sawdust, tracking his steel-toed boots across the floor I'd just mopped. Tracy followed, flipping through a home decor magazine. Dinner began like always. Derek grunted thanks through a full mouth. Tracy started in about the water pressure again. I was thinking, she said, reaching for a second slice of cornbread, maybe we redo the master bath first. Once it's legally ours, I want to put in a rain shower. That old tub is gross. Derek didn't flinch. We'll figure it out. I've got the paperwork stuff halfway done. I kept chewing, kept listening, and smiled just enough. That night, after dishes, I took out my phone. No calls, no long texts, just one word, typed slow and deliberate, to Glenda, list. I didn't need to say more. At 11:03 the next morning, my phone buzzed again. From Glenda, Helen, all cash offer just came in, full asking, plus 15,000, no contingencies, wants it fast. I sat in the laundry room, folding towels as if nothing in the world had changed, but inside me, something uncurled, something that had waited patiently, quietly, for its moment to breathe. I wrote back, accept. Back in the kitchen, I opened the pantry and reached behind the bag of sugar for the envelope I'd placed there days ago. My jewelry, a copy of Walter's will, a key to the storage unit I rented across town under my maiden name. I locked it all in my purse. Dinner that night was spaghetti. fast, forgettable. But tomorrow? Tomorrow I would cook nothing, pack everything, because the house wasn't theirs to plan around anymore. The banging started before 9 a.m., 2 hours before he usually pretended to be busy. Derek was in the kitchen with a stud finder and a box of unfinished cabinets he bought off Craigslist. No permit, no plan, just a man with a hammer and something to prove. "I told you this wall's too shallow," he muttered to himself, then louder to me, "If you're not gonna help, don't stand there watching." I stood anyway, arms folded, back straight, silent. He was building like the house owed him permanence, and I let him. Every nail he sunk into that plaster was another breadcrumb leading him to the truth. This wasn't his to fix, not anymore. The smell of sawdust mixed with burnt toast. Tracy had forgotten the bread in the toaster again. She floated in with her chipped mug and bare feet, scolding Derek like she was on set for a home makeover show. "Try to keep the mess off the floor. I just swept yesterday." "You didn't sweep," he snapped. "She did." He gestured at me with a flick of the wrist, like I was part of the broom closet. She barely looked at me. "Well then, thank her." I said nothing. By noon, the doorbell rang. Tracy peeked out, then turned back toward me. "Hey, Helen, there's some guy out front. Clipboard and camera. Says he's here to measure the lot? Survey or something?" I dried my hands and walked calmly to the front door, where Alicia stood in dark sunglasses and a tidy ponytail, dressed in what Derek would probably call county khakis. The real estate agent was disguised as an assessor, clipboard and all. "Just confirming boundary markers," Alicia said, raising her voice slightly so Tracy could hear. "Standard for subdivision alignment." "Can I help you with anything?" Tracy asked. Alicia smiled professionally. "Nope. Just need a few exterior shots. Shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. Tracy narrowed her eyes, then shrugged and went back inside. When Alicia passed me on her way around the side, she whispered, just low enough, "Offer still stands. Buyer wants the close to move faster." I gave a small nod. "Let it." Inside, I returned to the sink. Emily tiptoed in from the hallway, carrying something in her cupped hands. She looked unsure, like she wasn't sure if she was interrupting something invisible. "I made you this," she said, holding out a thin braided bracelet, yarn and beads. Lopsided, but deliberate. "For your birthday, even if no one else cared." My breath caught. I didn't speak. I just took it in my hands, held it like glass, then reached forward and tied it onto my wrist. The bracelet sat just below my sleeve as I scrubbed dishes I hadn't dirtied. My hands shook, not from exhaustion, from emotion I had no room to spill. That night, the kitchen echoed. The TV buzzed in the background. Tracy opened a bottle of wine and told Derek, "We should paint the guest room next. Maybe a seafoam." He shrugged. "Once it's ours legally, sure." The bracelet on my wrist tightened as I clenched my hand. At 8:42 p.m., my phone buzzed once on the table beside me. Text from Glenda. Escrow opened. Buyer confirmed. Closing in 3 business days. They tracked every crumb I dropped, but they missed the ground crumbling under them. "Ma, are you trying to raise the damn electric bill?" Derek's voice slapped through the kitchen like a wet towel. I'd left the hallway light on, 10 minutes maybe, while folding laundry in the back room. The bulbs were LED, barely warm. But that wasn't the point. He wanted something to control. I stood at the sink, rinsing a chipped mug. "I was still using it." "Then turn it off when you're done. God, it's like you forget how bills work." He grabbed a soda from the fridge and slammed the door with more drama than force. Tracy chimed in from the living room, not even looking up from her tablet. "She's just sulking. Guilt games are exhausting, Helen." I wiped the mug dry. Not a word. Not even a blink. Let them think I was sulking. It made them careless. That night, while they snored behind their closed bedroom door, I slipped on my tennis shoes, pulled my small suitcase from under the bed, and made another trip to the locker unit I'd rented off Ashland Avenue. I packed slowly, only the things that mattered. Photo albums, Walter's cufflinks, the bracelet Emily gave me. My birth certificate. The keepsake spoon set from my grandmother. Not much, but enough to feel like I was carving a life out of the house before they even knew it was escaping them. The locker was climate-controlled, secure, and registered under my maiden name. I kept the key in the pocket of a winter coat I knew they'd never touch. Fresno never gave us real winters. The next morning, Glenda called as I folded towels. "They'll start noticing the shift soon," she warned. "Once they do, they'll try to stir things up. Delay, challenge." "Let them try," I said softly, pressing a fresh towel flat on the bed. "But do not provoke. Escrow's moving fast. We're almost through." "Understood," I said. That day, I rearranged the living room, just a little. Shifted the recliner 4 inches left, tilted the lamp in the hallway, just enough to make them think they were going crazy if they noticed. I wanted them off balance. I wanted them second-guessing their own control. Tracy made a comment that evening at dinner. "Did this couch always face this way?" Derek shrugged. "She probably bumped it cleaning again." "Or trying to get attention," Tracy muttered, stabbing her salad with the grace of a fork fight. I smiled behind my water glass. "Just clearing space." They didn't ask what for. That night, I opened the top drawer of my nightstand. Beneath a stack of old greeting cards and a pair of reading glasses, I had tucked the buyer's earnest money check. Thick paper, raised ink, a sum Derek had never touched and never would. I took my Bible from the second shelf, Walter's edition, cracked leather, soft-edged pages. I'd underlined Proverbs in that one. I remembered that. I slipped the check inside, just between "the righteous shall inherit the land, and he who troubles his own house shall inherit the wind." I closed the cover gently. Let it rest. Tomorrow would bring more noise, more doors slamming, more sighs when I left crumbs on the counter, more reminders of how invisible they thought I was. But the earth beneath their feet was already splitting, they just hadn't heard it yet. Saturday morning, the house was quiet for once. Derek and Tracy had gone out to run errands, which usually meant coffee, passive-aggressive bickering, and wandering Home Depot aisles looking for projects that might make them feel like owners. They didn't know the house was already promised to someone else. I wiped down the kitchen counter one more time, double-checked the hallway for clutter, and pulled the curtains back just enough to let the sun warm the floors. The smell of lemon cleaner hung in the air, faint but bright, clean but not sterile. At exactly 9:15 a.m., Alicia arrived with the buyer and their inspector. The buyer, a poised woman in her early 40s named Carmen Torres, had an energy I liked instantly, measured but confident. Her eyes swept the space like someone who'd been let down before and didn't have the luxury of fantasizing anymore. She wasn't imagining, she was verifying. "Morning, Helen," Alicia said with a knowing smile. "Morning," I replied, stepping aside to let them in. "I'm just helping my son get ready to leave." Carmen raised a brow at that, but didn't question it. She turned slowly in the living room, her gaze pausing on the fireplace Derek had chipped during his failed attempt at a DIY mantel. "I love this layout," she said. "Feels honest." The inspector began his routine, measuring, scribbling, tapping walls like a quiet metronome. Carmen trailed into the dining room, ran her hand along the windowsill. "You've kept this place in amazing shape." I shrugged, modest. "It's been mine a long time." Just then, a small voice broke the calm. "Leave?" Emily stood at the edge of the hallway, hair messy from a late morning nap, clutching the crocheted blanket I made her 2 Christmases ago. I crouched down to her level. "Only the ones who push too hard, sweetheart." She blinked slowly, unsure what that meant. I smoothed her hair back, kissed her forehead, and gently pointed her toward the TV. "I'll be there in a minute. Go finish your cartoon." She padded away obediently. Carmen watched her, then looked back at me. "She yours?" "My granddaughter. She seems resilient." I nodded. "She has to be." We continued the tour. Alicia kept the tone light and casual, but I caught every glance, every exchanged note. The buyer wanted the deal to stick, and fast, and I wasn't going to be the reason it didn't. By the time we circled back to the kitchen, the inspector nodded and packed his things. "All clean," he said. "Minor wear, structurally solid." Carmen extended her hand to Alicia. "I want the final paperwork drawn up today. If we can close Monday, I'm ready." Alicia looked to me. "Helen?" I nodded. "Let's make it official." They left through the back gate, careful not to attract attention. I waited until their car turned the corner before locking the door and pulling the curtains halfway closed again. At 11:47 a.m., my phone buzzed on the table. "Glenda, text. Official closing scheduled. Keys and deed transfer. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. I stared at the screen for a long second. Then I stood, walked to the guest room, and opened the closet. The last box of my belongings sat beneath Derek's high school trophies. I lifted it with both hands, carried it quietly to the car, and locked it in the trunk. The house had been his museum of resentment long enough. It was time to make it ready for someone who didn't treat rooms like thrones. The house was still, save for the refrigerator's hum and the sound of my slippers crossing the tile. I stood in the bathroom, facing a mirror streaked with age and toothpaste splatter. I didn't wipe it clean. I needed to see myself through the residue. My reflection looked back, quieter than I remembered. The skin was thinner now, creased from decades of being useful, polite, unthanked. But the eyes hadn't dulled. They watched the surface like they knew what came next. I leaned in, saw the scar just above my eyebrow, faint now but permanent. From the time Derek slammed the cabinet door into my face and called it accidental, I remembered the apologies that came only after witnesses arrived. I ran my fingers along my jaw. Walter used to kiss that line every night before bed. "You carry the day here," he'd say. "Let it go now." I never did. I opened the bathroom drawer and pulled out the shoebox I'd hidden months ago. Inside, photos, yellowing at the edges but clear in their defiance. Me in scrubs, beaming with tired pride after my last night shift. Me holding infant Derek with one arm, medical textbooks in the other. A postcard from New Mexico Walter sent during a solo fishing trip. "Wish you were here. But you're everywhere with me anyway." I sifted through the paper fragments of the woman I used to be. Not someone who sulked, someone who served, who gave, who built a home even when no one acknowledged it. I reached for a blank note card from the back of the box, took my pen, wrote 7 words with the steadiness of a surgeon. Every home has an owner and a consequence. I folded the card once, slipped it into an envelope, sealed it shut. Derek had called me invisible. Let this remind him I'd never disappeared. I just stopped announcing my presence. Their bedroom door was half cracked like always. I slid the envelope under his pillow without a sound. Back in the kitchen, my phone lit up on the counter. "Glenda, call. Tomorrow at 10. Deed final. Keys in hand." She paused. "They're going to explode, Helen." "I know," I said, "but they can do it on someone else's property." "Want me to be with you when they find out?" "Number, I'd rather they see a clean plate and no one left to serve it." We hung up. I poured the last of the coffee into my mug and stood by the window, staring out at the early morning. The neighborhood was waking up, sprinklers ticking on, dogs barking 2 doors down. And then I saw it, a moving truck, across the street, doors open, 2 young men in uniforms unloading boxes. A woman stood by the front step of the house opposite mine, clipboard in hand, baby on her hip. New beginnings, new tenants, another family building something from scratch. They didn't know yet how fast a home could rot from the inside. But I did. Tomorrow, my silence would become their reckoning. And this time, I'd watch from the other side of the mirror. My name never left the title, but today, it walked right back into the house. Glenda's office was quiet, too quiet for what we were about to do. Just outside, traffic buzzed across Herndon Avenue, but inside it felt like I was signing peace after war. The pen felt heavier than it should have, weighty in my fingers like it knew it wasn't just writing, it was reclaiming. "Take your time," Glenda said, sliding the final transfer paperwork across the polished oak table. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were lit with anticipation. The buyer sat across from me, Carmen Torres, calm as ever, her black blouse pressed sharp and clean, her gold necklace catching the light. She smiled gently, not as a victor, but as someone grateful. "Thank you for making space for us," she said, placing a small white carnation on the table. "We'll take good care of it." I stared at the flower for a long beat. Then I signed the last line, dotted the I in marks, and pressed the pen down as I lifted my hand, leaving a slight smear of ink like a fingerprint. Proof I had touched this, owned this, right to the last second. Glenda slid me a sealed folder. "Deeds filed, certified. You'll get digital and hard copies, but this," she tapped the folder, "this is yours, legally and otherwise." I slipped it into my handbag, next to my wallet and my granddaughter's yarn bracelet. My fingers lingered there a second longer than they needed to. Glenda's phone buzzed once. She checked it. "Transfer will register Countyside by 3 p.m. sharp. By then they'll know. You sure you don't want me to be there?" "No," I said, standing. "They won't be looking for you. They'll be looking for the maid." She nodded, tight-lipped. "Call if they try anything." I left the building with the late morning sun warming my shoulders. Fresno heat always crept in slow, but today it felt clean, honest, like the world had been reset just enough to let me breathe different. At home, the house was still. Derek was at work. Tracy was likely out at one of her day spa errands, places where people pretended stress was a luxury, not a weapon. I tied on my apron, preheated the oven, and pulled the cast iron skillet from the cabinet. I hadn't made cornbread in months, not since the last time they pretended I was family. This batch wasn't for them, it was for me. Flour sifted through my fingers. Buttermilk poured smooth. I folded the batter gently, the way Walter taught me. No harsh mixing, just patience and rhythm. The scent of baking rose in warm waves through the kitchen. By the time the crust browned, I had already washed and dried every dish. I wasn't cleaning for them. I was setting the stage. At 3:06 p.m., I heard the garage door rattle open. Derek's heavy steps clomped across the tile like a man still convinced the floor respected him. He didn't greet me. He never did after work anymore. Just tossed his keys on the counter and opened the stack of mail like he was tearing into a carcass. Then he froze. His hands clutched a white envelope, the same kind I'd seen Glenda seal earlier. "What's this real estate crap?" he barked, voice sharp enough to nick the air. He held it up like it was an accusation. I didn't look at him. I was slicing the cornbread into even squares, stacking them quietly onto a ceramic plate. "Read it," I said. "Then we can talk about what comes next." Derek slammed a stack of mail on the kitchen counter, the top envelope bent and damp at the corners. "You get junk? Deal with it," he muttered, barely glancing at me before stomping toward the fridge like he owned the air in the room. I wiped my hands on the dish towel, picked up the envelope, and ran my thumb under the seal. My heart didn't pound, my fingers didn't shake. It felt like pulling back the cover on an old story I already knew the ending to. The paper slid out smooth and official, crisp black lettering across thick stock. Notice of property transfer and occupancy termination. I read every line slowly, carefully. The ink might have been dry, but the justice was fresh. From across the room, Tracy's eyes flicked up from her phone. "What's that?" she asked, rising from the couch like a bloodhound catching a new scent. Before I could fold it back, she was in front of me, snatching it from my hand with a glare. She read fast, her jaw locked by the second sentence. "What the hell is this?" Her voice cracked at the edge, high-pitched, not used to panic. Derek turned, holding a bottle of orange juice. "What's what?" Tracy jabbed the paper at him. "It says the house was sold, that we have to. This can't be real." He grabbed it, eyes scanning, his brow knotting deeper with every line. "Is this a joke?" he barked at me. I didn't move, just looked at him with the same calm he used to twist into power. "You'll need to speak to the new owner." He stepped forward. "What the hell does that mean, Mom?" Tracy's face flushed. This isn't legal. You can't do this to your own son. We live here." "I lived here too," I said quietly, turning away. "That's different," Tracy snapped. "We need this place. We've built our life here." "You built it on someone else's silence," I murmured, but they didn't hear me. They never did. I walked past them, slow, deliberate, the way people walk when they know time has finally caught up to justice. Behind me, Derek's voice rose, the same voice that once told me I was lucky to have a roof at my age, that mumbled thanks with a mouthful of food I'd cooked. "You can't just hand our house to strangers," he yelled, following me halfway down the hallway. I turned once. "I didn't hand it to strangers." That stopped him for a beat. Confusion folded across his forehead like badly ironed linen. Then, ding-dong. The doorbell rang. 3 chimes, crisp and clear. Not the doorbell of a friend. The doorbell of change. Tracy looked toward the sound like it was a gunshot. "What now?" she hissed. I opened the door before they could move. The sound of Shelley's heels clicking across the hardwood was louder than it should have been, or maybe it was just that everyone had gone so still. Even the air felt like it stopped to listen. She stepped inside with the confidence of someone who knew her paperwork was airtight. A bright crimson folder clutched in one hand, brass keys jingling gently in the other. "Good morning," she said, eyes darting politely toward Tracy and Derek. "I'm Shelley Dobbs, real estate liaison for the new homeowner. I believe you've received notice." Tracy's mouth twisted. "You can't just walk in here. This is my house." Shelley didn't flinch. She opened the folder with surgical calm. "Actually, as of 10:04 this morning, it legally belongs to my client. Title transfer is complete. Escrow cleared. New deed recorded." Derek stepped between them, puffed up like he was still the biggest presence in the room. "Look, there's been a mistake. My mom's confused. This was supposed to go to me." "No mistake," Shelley said, not unkindly. "All filings are valid. Your mother had full authority. You're not listed on the title, sir. Never were." He looked at me like I'd stabbed him in the stomach. "You did this behind my back." I met his stare. "I did it behind your noise." Tracy scoffed and turned to Shelley. "Then we'll fight it. You can't kick us out? I'll sue. We have rights." Shelley pulled a stapled packet from the folder and handed it to her. "This outlines the process. But just so you're aware, no court will grant occupancy when there's no legal tenancy or agreement. This was her house to sell." Tracy flipped through it, her hands shaking slightly now. Her eyes stopped on something mid-page. "You planned this," she hissed at me. "You've been planning this for months." "Longer," I said. Derek's voice softened, that familiar wheedling tone he used when his credit card got declined and he needed help. "Mom, come on, we're family. You really want to put us out like this?" I walked to the sink and picked up the same sponge he'd once slapped in my face like a joke. I turned it over in my hand slowly. "You should have remembered we were family when I was down on my knees, cleaning up after your life like it was still my job." Silence. Emily, who had been hovering just beyond the living room archway, stepped forward. She looked like she didn't know where to go, who to believe, but she came straight to me. Her arms wrapped around my waist. She buried her face into my side. "Grandma," she whispered, voice trembling, "are you mad at Daddy?" I bent and cupped her face in my hands. "No, sweetheart, I'm done being mad. I'm just finally being heard." Derek tried again, but the weight of the moment silenced even him. He looked around like the house might rescue him, like the walls he'd taken for granted would suddenly rise and speak on his behalf. Instead, Shelley cleared her throat gently. "They have 72 hours to vacate," she said, her voice crisp but not cruel. "After that, the new owner takes possession. Any resistance becomes a legal matter." Derek's jaw tightened. Tracy looked like she wanted to spit nails. But I didn't flinch. Shelley placed the keys gently on the edge of the counter, the exact spot where Derek used to throw his car fob without a word, expecting someone else to pick it up. This time, no one moved. Except Emily. She tugged on my sweater and whispered, "Do I have to go with them?" That caught Tracy off guard. Her mouth opened, but I raised a hand before she could answer. "Let's all take a moment," I said quietly. Think carefully about what comes next. Another silence, longer, heavier. Then, without a word, Derek walked into the garage and slammed the door behind him. Tracy stood there with the folder in her hands, face twitching between rage and realization. And Shelley? Shelley smiled softly and checked her watch. The sound of boxes dragging across hardwood was louder than their voices now. Tracy moved through the house like a storm losing strength, brittle and sputtering. The anger hadn't left her, but the power had. She stuffed dishes into thin cardboard like she hoped they'd break, muttering sharp little insults under her breath. "Ungrateful witch," she hissed, slamming the cutlery drawer. "Selfish old bee." I didn't flinch. I just folded another towel into my suitcase. I wasn't packing out of necessity. I was leaving by choice. Across the house, the garage door thudded shut for the third time that morning. Derek hadn't made eye contact since Shelley handed over the keys. He came in only to shower and eat, if Tracy hadn't already burned dinner in passive protest. He hadn't said a word to Emily since the papers landed. The silence in the house was different now. Not heavy with control, not sharp with judgment. It was a silence that was almost peaceful, if you ignored the bitterness clawing around the edges. Emily stood at the foot of the stairs with a stack of lined paper and a marker in her hand. She was trying so hard to stay small, invisible, but her eyes kept flicking to me like she was making sure I was still real. "Can I sit with you?" she asked, her voice barely louder than the hum of the box fan by the window. "Of course," I said, patting the couch beside me. She climbed up and curled her legs under her. We sat in stillness for a minute. Then she handed me the paper. On it, in messy, slanted writing, was a single sentence: "You're more than cleaning. You're my safe space." My throat tightened. I folded the card carefully, like it was something sacred. "Thank you, baby girl," I said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "That means more than you know." She didn't say anything else, just rested her head on my arm, breathing slow and deep, as if the world outside this moment wasn't worth remembering. By the next morning, I had everything I wanted out of the house packed neatly into the trunk of a modest rental sedan. Glenda had found me a quiet duplex 10 minutes away, 2 bedrooms, sunlight in the kitchen, and, most importantly, 6 months paid in full, her parting gift, along with the legal closure I'd never dared to hope for. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe them that. The air felt different as I closed the front door behind me, like even the walls had exhaled. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the rows of almond trees, I sat on the stoop of my new place, sipping black coffee out of a ceramic mug with a chipped handle. No one asked me to do laundry. No one criticized the way I stirred the pot. The silence was mine now. My phone buzzed. Voicemail. "Tracy." I held the phone for a long moment before pressing play. Her voice came through ragged and mean. "You think you won. You think you're strong, but you'll die alone, Helen. That house doesn't love you. It never did, and neither will anyone else." She hung up without a goodbye. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sad. I just set the phone down, walked to the bathroom, and hung Emily's card beside the mirror. Safe space. Not spotless. Not obedient. Not background noise. Safe. The door creaked open slower than it used to. Maybe the hinges felt the absence before I did. Inside, the house echoed. Not with voices, but with emptiness. Floorboards bare, walls stripped of the smug art Tracy once hung above every thermostat like she was curating a gallery of mediocrity. The air smelled like old lemons and dust, fake citrus over real rot. They were gone. No shattered windows, no kicked-in doors, just hollow space and a silence that didn't scream. It observed. I stepped inside, my shoes making soft taps on the tile I'd scrubbed 100 times with Derek's cheap mop, and Tracy's smug approval. There was no furniture, no yelling, no crumbs. But near the kitchen sink, forgotten or maybe left like a message, was a single sponge, curled inward, dried stiff. I stared at it a moment, unmoving. Then I picked it up gently and dropped it into the trash without a word. No ceremony, no satisfaction, just the click of the lid sealing what didn't belong to me anymore. The front door knocked once, polite, hesitant. I opened it to find a young couple standing on the porch, their arms looped together, faces bright with promise. Behind them, a boy, maybe 10, swung a baseball glove in one hand and offered me a toothy grin. "Ms. Marks?" the woman asked. "We're the Corteses. We just picked up the keys from Shelley. Hope we're not too early?" "Right on time," I said, smiling faintly. They stepped inside carefully, as if afraid to disturb something sacred. Their son ran up the stairs without asking, yelling, "I want this room!" His voice filled the space like it belonged there. "I hope you don't mind," I said, reaching into my tote. I pulled out a worn, soft-covered cookbook, stained at the corners, pages marked by use and memory. "For the kitchen, it matters who cooks." The wife's eyes lit up. "Thank you. We don't have many traditions yet, but maybe this'll be the start." I nodded. "Just make sure no one throws sponges." She laughed, not understanding but grateful. "We'll take care of it here." "Really?" I didn't doubt her. I walked through one last time, trailing fingers along the hallway where Derek used to bark orders, past the window where Emily once watched squirrels as if they held secrets. Everything was different now, not because they were gone, but because I no longer needed to carry what they left behind. Outside, the air had warmed just enough to soften my joints. The sun was lower now, casting golden stripes over the sidewalk like spilled honey. I climbed into the rental and didn't look back. My new place was quiet. The porch light clicked on automatically as I approached, a small welcome in a world that no longer required my permission to rest. Inside, I placed the empty tote by the door and hung my keys beside Emily's drawing, Helen holding keys, standing tall, the sun behind her like a crown. I made a cup of tea, jasmine this time, and let it steep as the evening settled in. Then, a knock. 3 quick taps. I opened the door and there she was, Emily. Backpack slung over both shoulders, hair messy from the wind, eyes wide and wet but steady. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. I stepped aside without a word. Emily didn't say much as she stepped into the house. Her sneakers squeaked against the linoleum. Her backpack thudded softly as she let it slide from her shoulders, but her eyes searched the space like she was mapping every edge of it for permission. To breathe. To belong. To be safe. She looked smaller than usual. Not younger, just untethered. "I brought my own toothbrush," she said quietly, like it was the only thing she had control over. "You hungry?" I asked. She hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "I could eat." We didn't rush it. I set a pot of water to boil. She sat at the kitchen table, tracing the faint scratches on its surface with one finger like she was reading Braille. I pulled out the pasta and sauce, nothing fancy, just warm. Just enough. Halfway through stirring, I heard her sniffle. Not a sob, not a cry for attention, just the kind of quiet break that only shows up when a child runs out of armor. "She says it's just until she gets a job," Emily whispered. I didn't ask who she was. I didn't need to. "She says I'm old enough to figure things out, that if I stay with you, maybe she can focus." I set the spoon down and turned off the burner, walked over and crouched to her level. "You don't have to carry her choices, baby. That's not yours." Emily looked at me, eyes shining but proud. "I didn't come here to be saved. I just didn't want to be somewhere I'm in the way." I reached out slowly, gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "You're not in the way. You never were. You're the reason I made space." We ate in calm silence after that. No phones, no yelling in the background, no eggshells on the floor. Later we baked snickerdoodles, her favorite. She cracked the eggs with the focus of a scientist. I let her pick the music, and she chose an old Motown playlist. "This sounds like something you'd like," she said, and she was right. The oven filled the house with warm sugar and cinnamon, clinging to the walls like a soft memory. Afterward, we planted a few tiny succulents on the windowsill. She named hers Button and said it looked brave. That night, after she'd brushed her teeth and changed into pajamas 3 sizes too big, she padded into the living room, holding a pillow under one arm. "Can I stay in your room just tonight?" "My bed's already made for 2, I said. She climbed in next to me, and for the first time in years, the room felt full in a way that didn't weigh me down. The next morning, while she still slept, I brewed coffee and sat at my tiny kitchen table with a pen and the manila envelope Glenda had left me. Living Trust, Update Addendum, Guardian Beneficiary, Emily Marks. I stared at the line, pen hovering. Then I signed my name in clean, steady script. Just as I was sealing the envelope, my phone buzzed. Glenda. I picked up on the second ring. Everything okay? I think you'll find this interesting, she said, a bit of amusement in her voice. A local radio station reached out. One of the paralegals passed along your story. They're asking if you'd be willing to speak, on air. I blinked, caught off guard. They want to hear me? They want your story, Helen, not a version. Yours. Behind me, I heard the soft shuffle of feet, Emily rubbing her eyes in the hallway wrapped in a blanket. Is it someone important? She asked groggily. I looked at her and smiled. Maybe it's just time someone listened. The mic was warmer than I expected, like it had been waiting for my breath. Across the glass, the producer gave me a thumbs up. Red light. Live. The host leaned forward, voice smooth and practiced. Today we have Helen Marks with us, widowed, mother, grandmother, and survivor, I think it's fair to say. Helen, thank you for being here. I nodded once, hands folded in my lap. Thank you for asking. He smiled. So, let's begin where your story turned. Tell us, what happened on your birthday? I looked at the mic, not the host. He threw a sponge at me, wet, soft, nothing violent, but it wasn't about that. It was how easy it came to him, how quickly my son, who I raised, could reduce me to something disposable, useful, quiet. There was a long silence. Even the studio seemed to still. I didn't fill it with tears or bitterness. I spoke like I had cleaned for decades, deliberate, focused, thorough. I scrubbed floors for people who respected me more than my own family did, I said, and one day I realized I was still scrubbing. But it wasn't dirt. It was their entitlement. The host leaned back, letting my words fill the space. I didn't fight back with yelling, I continued. I fought with paperwork. I used the silence they gave me as cover. And I sold the house out from under them because it was still mine. There was no applause, no dramatic gasp, just a truth hung in the air like a fresh sheet on a line, clean and impossible to ignore. After the interview aired, the letters started coming. First, a few postcards, then full envelopes, women from Sacramento, Tempe, Little Rock, men too, neighbors, grandmothers, even one teenager who wrote in pencil because she said her parents checked her email. Thank you for saying it out loud. You reminded me I wasn't crazy. My daughter and I listened together. We cried, then we made cookies. Each one I read slowly. I didn't frame them or pin them up. I kept them in a plain shoebox under the bed, where the important things often live. That week, Emily brought me a new drawing. Crayon on construction paper, me, standing tall, holding a big gold key in one hand. A little house behind me, windows glowing. A speech bubble, no. Another, yes, I matter. I didn't ask what inspired it. I didn't need to. I bought a simple black frame and placed it beside my deed copy on the bookshelf. The two stood next to each other like old friends who knew what it meant to fight for air. Then, 2 days later, my phone buzzed. Derek. I stared at the name for a full minute before opening the message. I'm sorry. I didn't see what I was doing until it was too late. I hope someday you'll talk to me again. That was it. No mom, no love you. Just a digital apology tossed into the void like a pebble skipping across a lake he no longer owned. I didn't reply. Some silences aren't cold, they're earned. Later that evening, Emily and I cleaned the kitchen together. Flour on the counter, her laughter bouncing off the walls. I watched her cut dough into little hearts and circles, pressing each one like it mattered. At the end of it all, she handed me a warm cookie and said, "You know what I love most about this place?" What? She pointed to the oven. It's clean, but not scrubbed clean, like it belongs to someone who likes being here. I smiled, biting into the soft sugar and butter. They threw a sponge, I said quietly.